When we talk about video games, we don't usually think of them as works of art. At the same time, what counts as art is primarily a historical question. Since the historical situation can change, and we can create different definitions about our subject, it's worth considering the medium as a potential set of artworks. Due to the fact that the classification affects their evaluation, in my video, I try to focus on the psychologically and philosophically relevant aspects of video games. For a long time, the popularity of video games was accompanied by some kind of moral panic in lay circles. And the typical scientific approach was to examine the association between violent behavior and gaming. Now we can easily see how a criticism that reduces the value of media products to their so-called moral value can benefit from the results of such a one-sided approach. But there is a growing critical audience out there, similar to artwork communities or literary circles. I find it striking that while an artwork can be interpreted in several ways, the usual game critic just highlights some salient feature and quickly moves on. Now we take the opposite approach. In this video, I turn against the commonplace of putting fun above all reaction in gameplay criticism and interpretation. My first assertion is just plain as it is. There are far more aesthetically oriented emotions play a significant role in our gameplay experience than sheer fun. Of course we can always say, nobody has any right to interfere with our sheer fun. But games are getting closer to realism today, and some of them are really close. So the question is here, what can we do about that fact? And the answer is a question again. Do you laugh at horror scenes? Horror isn't fun, am I right? Of course, we can enjoy the gameplay, but it's often not humorous. Yes, that's right. It's right even if in GTA 5 you get a billboard with a message. Hell awaits if you're having fun, or something like that. Everybody talks about fun. And it can be an advertising gimmick, like fun mathematics. And I know it's about the slapstick comedy of Tom and Jerry, but it's not the same. I mean, humor and enjoyment. Of course, there are those folks who enjoy competition because it's fair, not because it's funny, or enjoy the tragic arc of the story because they can identify with it. They exist because narrative-oriented game design exists. In the broadest sense, these learned reactions gain their power from relevant experiences with designed visuals, narratives, or other media products. For example, there is a weak association between the two scenes, I mean stylistically, and the emotion of awe or the concept of sublime is based on connections like this. But what exactly does funny mean? Fun is defined by the Oxford English Dictionary as light-hearted pleasure, enjoyment or amusement, boisterous joviality or merrymaking, entertainment. Or more scientifically, fun is an experience of liberating engagement, a temporary release from psychological restriction via hedonically engaging activity. But a story-driven game restricts our engagement in several ways. The phenomenon is well known since traditional media products, like dramas, have the ability to evoke emotional responses related to their somewhat restrictive content. So what exactly is the difference between this kind of stuff and this realistic kind of stuff? We all know that emotional engagement is frequently achieved through realistic representation. We like to breathe when the wind howls and the trees are bending. We like the suspension before enemy attack. We like horror when it's controllable, safe, and convenient. And we participate in tragedy when it doesn't have a heavy impact on us. These emotions, feelings, or sensations are not full-blown. They're just mimicking their real-world counterparts, proxies for narrative understanding. But they are here, and they are undeniably not kind of a fun. What about guilt? Guilt can also be described as, like shame, a moral emotion related to the violation of social or moral norm. It's almost the opposite of fun. Obviously, you feel ashamed after a missed virtual headshot, but do you ever feel guilt after a virtual murder, or maybe after a sad cutscene? I want to mention theories that are great contributions to the understanding of media-related attitude change. The desensitization theory and the excitation transfer theory. These frameworks help us to understand how anger and fear, aka everyday reactions to violent content, gradually become fun, and later how fun becomes everything else. The concept of desensitization is easy to understand. as our emotional reactivity decreases as a result of frequent exposure to stimulus. One good way to counter our fears of darkness and zombies is to play horror games. In order to enjoy ourselves, we should be able to counter any panic reactions. But after the accommodation process, we still want that fear and eventually we learn to enjoy it. Do we feel fun or fear now? Looking at the most simple model of emotional reaction, we can see two related concepts. One is excitation or excitement, which is basically the physiological reaction like increased heart rate, and the other is cognition, which is the interpretation of the current situation. We all know that residual feelings can linger long after a meaningful event. Or perhaps a better example is that when we feel angry at someone and that anger turns out to be unjustified, our initial excitement can increase our relief. This can sometimes be quite amusing. Relief after cinematic suspense works the same way when our accumulated distress about our hero or the next corner is dissolved by the story resolution at hand. And gameplay mechanics, like rewarding combat loops, are prime examples of such changes. Can the emotional guilt be fun after all? It can be, and that's masochism, but we don't strive for such things. Proper understanding of a game narrative is not such a process. In the broadest sense, culture ties negatively balanced emotions to higher values, which in that way makes them bearable, but not enjoyable. Now we know that imagination and art can evoke emotions without the test of reality, therefore we have a far-fetched symmetry between fiction and real life. Our highest emotional experiences are often cathartic scene memories, and movie depiction often mimic real life. But in the so-called real world, it's usually inappropriate to be fearful for someone who actually faces no threat, because emotions are correct if they represent their objects correctly. I mean, you must be fearful if something objectively dangerous lurks around. But horror games, movies, and novels are not physically dangerous things, so we can feel these negative emotions at a lower level, typically transforming them into mild excitement, then fun. And then there is a strange interaction between virtual cruelty and fun, where obviously the mechanics of a fun carnage is playing the role of rewarding, socially oriented compensation. And there is also broad social consensus regarding the opposite, that a horror scene, if it's really scary, warrants or justifies a fearful reaction. Some say it's moral, but if I write, this is the most reasonable view. If we are resistant to a fiction according to which an unjust or unnecessary kill is a good or funny thing, this is not a matter of finding it difficult to produce some necessary engagement with the gameplay. We can easily end the mission, but we may have difficulty in taking our engagement further. We might not want to reacting emotionally at all, or we may be unable to go further in our imagination because that requires thinking in a way that the unnecessary killing is right statement could be true. Moral and emotional truths are true because other things are true as well. But what could make it the case that the unnecessary killing is right or funny? Maybe the story will go on to tell us that we are criminals. But if the fiction gives us no clue of any such difference from the real world,
the only living person you've met? You mean I'm the last living human on the planet?
we are stuck with the bare, meaningless action and gameplay reward. Of course, we cannot force specific emotions voluntarily, but those very reactions are sensitive to information. As a game designer, you can easily create a startle effect, but not fear. But with art historical knowledge, you can create meaningful associations. Mood, emotion, immersion are elusive. They don't respond to rules.